All right, we are super excited to be here today with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson, an adjunct associate professor of brain and cognitive sciences at the University of Rochester, who is an expert in the psychology of eating. She's also the author of a New York Times bestseller, Bright Line Eating: The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free. She's president of the Institute of Sustainable Weight Loss and the founder and CEO of Bright Line Eating Solutions, a company that is dedicated to helping people achieve the health and vibrancy that accompany permanent weight loss. Her program utilizes cutting-edge research to explain how the brain blocks weight loss. And every day she teaches people how to undo that damage so that they can live happy, thin, and free. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Susan.
Oh, thanks, Cyrus. It's so good to be here with you.
It's fantastic. So you have a very, very effective approach to helping people de-addict themselves from food and lose weight for the rest of their life. So can you tell our listeners about the actual neuroscience of food addiction and what actually blocks people from losing weight?
Yeah, I love how you said de-addict themselves from food. That's awesome. Yeah, the neuroscience of food addiction and how the brain is blocking them from losing weight. So the neuroscience of food addiction is essentially the same as the neuroscience of drug addiction, actually, Cyrus. So one of the things I go around sort of teaching people is like what a drug is and where addiction lies, because people are kind of confused about that. A lot of people think that addiction is in the drug, like heroin is addictive, and anyone who takes heroin for any given length of time, like a long enough period of time, will become addicted. And it's just not true. Like, you look, worldwide, people are going in for surgery all the time, like serious back surgery, and they get sent home with a Vicodin prescription. They're now on heavy opiates every day, several times a day for weeks and months, and they wean off at the soonest opportunity. A lot of them, not all of them, some of them develop a pill problem from that. But addiction actually isn't in the drug, it's in the person's brain. So not everybody is susceptible to addiction. This is kind of funny. I'm wickedly susceptible to addiction. But, if you look at foods today, the foods that we consider to be foods, they have the properties of drugs. Like a lot of them are manufactured the way we manufacture drugs. So if you think about what heroin is, I'll take two drugs, heroin and cocaine. Everyone agrees they're drugs. They're uncontroversial. What are they? Right? What is heroin? How do you get heroin? Well, it comes from the poppy plant. But you could sit in a field of poppies and eat poppies all day long and not get high and not get addicted. You would fail a urine test for opium. You would. It would be in your system, but like nothing would have happened to you on the way eating those poppies. But if you take the inner essence of that poppy plant and you extract it and then you refine and purify it down into a fine powder, you've now created heroin. So it's the same with cocaine. Cocaine comes from the coca plant in the Andes Mountains. Hikers rip the leaves off the coca plant and they put them in their cheek and they chew them. And, it gives you a little lift, kind of the equivalent of drinking half a cup of caffeinated tea, maybe. And it makes the inside of your cheek a little bit numb. But there's literally a published scientific paper documenting that chewing coca leaves is not addictive. Nobody's breaking into their grandma's house, stealing their grandma's VCR to go buy more coca leaves. This is not happening. Right? But you take the inner essence of this coca leaf and you refine and you purify it into a fine powder, and you've turned a normal, healthy plant into a drug. And we're doing the same thing for sugar and flour, like, corn, beets, sugarcane. These are actually healthy foods. Like I eat corn all the time. I eat beets almost every night in my salad. But if you take the inner essence of that plant and then you refine and you purify it into a powder, you've taken a healthy plant and you've turned it into a drug. And it's the same with flour. We're not talking about gluten. We're just talking about the refining process. You take a legume or a nut or a seed or a grain, it doesn't matter what, potato, white rice, brown rice, wheat, it doesn't matter. You take the inner essence, you extract it, and then you refine and purify it into a powder, and you've turned it into a drug. So, 80% of the calories in the American grocery store today have added sugar in them. Added sugar, 80% of the calories. And so what you see on PET scans, if you just look at brains, is you see the same effect in that special certain part of the brain for food addiction as you see for heroin and cocaine addiction. It's the same thing. You see what's called down regulation in the nucleus accumbens. The nucleus accumbens is this part of the brain that governs addiction, motivation, reward. It's the part of the brain that makes sure that we've got the oomph to go out and get something, like because you need more, you want more. So sex, food, fill in the blank, it's going to make sure that you get more. And if your dopamine receptors have been blown out, essentially, like thinned out, depleted, you're going to need to get another fix before the night's over. Like you're going to go out in a snowstorm to get some more, basically. And sugar and flour is what does it. Pizza, chips, ice cream, chocolate. These are it's sugar and flour. No, if you look at pizza, for example, it's not the cheese, it's not the sauce. Nobody's driving out in the middle of the night to get broccoli with cheese and sauce on it. It's the flour. So anyway, that's what food addiction is. Not everybody's equally susceptible, and that's how it works in the brain.
So you mentioned that you are wickedly susceptible to addiction. So how did you determine that?
Oh boy. Well, at first, just through a lot of fun and experimentation. I meant no harm. Yeah, so I think it started really with food, but I didn't know it. I was just, every kid loves candy and, whatever, but I was into food. Like I was a really good cook by the age of 8. By the age of 11, I weighed more than I weigh now. By the age of 12, more than that. By the age of 13, more than that. By the age of 14, more than that. And then when I was 14 years old, the summer between 8th grade and freshman year of high school, I took mushrooms, did my first drug. And not only did I have an amazing time, but I lost 7 pounds in one night. And just being out gallivanting, staying up all night, and probably just being dehydrated. But anyway, I stepped on the scale the next morning and my little 14-year-old world tilted on its axis. So for the next 6 years, I did drugs to manage my weight, to have fun, to rebel, whatever I was doing. And I'm not talking about just doing a little bit of drugs. I'm talking about heavy crystal meth addiction, heavy cocaine addiction, leading to heavy crack cocaine addiction, dropped out of high school, became a prostitute, didn't have a place to live. And that's where I was at when I was 20 years old. And I had a moment of clarity in a crack house when I was 20 years old. I had a blonde wig on my head, and I'd been there for days, literally days. And it was a Tuesday morning. And I had a moment where the universe just invested me with this knowledge that if I didn't get up and get out of there right then, that's all I was ever going to be. That I had to get up and go. So I grabbed my jacket and I walked out the door. And I haven't had a drink or a drug since. That was, 23 years ago. And but I knew when I got clean and sober that I would get fat. And I did, really fast. And, at first I was cool with it because I was just so glad that the nightmare that had become my life had just stopped, and I enrolled in community college. I got my GED. I enrolled in community college. I got a job at a movie theater selling popcorn. I got a legitimate life, moved back in with my mom. And I was fat. And 9 months later, I really cared. And, that started years of trying to figure out how to crack my food addiction and deal with it in the same way that my drug addiction just got put in its place when I instituted clear, bright lines for drugs and alcohol. No drugs or alcohol ever was the policy, just these clear, bright lines, unambiguous policy. And it took, I guess, about 8 years, 8.5 years. And I was obese at that point. I didn't know it, but I know now. I know what I weighed. So I look at the BMI chart. I'm like, oh, look at that. I was obese. But, what's interesting is food was harder. Food was harder to kick. I feel qualified to weigh in on addiction. Food is harder to kick than crack cocaine. I'm not even kidding you. It is harder. It is harder. It's harder because the cues are more ubiquitous. It's harder because there's more pushers in your environment shoving it down your face. It's harder because the lines are slipperier. You have to eat to survive. So the lines of what counts and what doesn't count just gives your saboteur all kinds of ammunition to rationalize, well, this little bit's okay, that little bit's okay. And if you have an addictive brain, cocaine, before you know it, you're down the slippery slope again, over and over and over again. So yeah, I mean, I've been addicted to just about everything, but food's the hardest.
Okay, that's actually really, that leads perfectly into the next question. Another thing too is that food is socially acceptable, right? Crack cocaine is not socially acceptable. If you were just doing that at a dinner party, people would be like, what are you doing? But if you're eating, flour, nobody's really going to question you. So
no, if you don't eat it, they're going to question you. Like, just try saying no thank you to pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving. Just try. They'll act like you're some kind of
heathen.
Yeah, they'll act like you're being offensive, like you're pulling down your pants and dancing in the room naked, or like they'll be like, come on, you're not gonna not eat pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving. You're not gonna diet on Thanksgiving, are you? Like, come on, like you're offending them.
Right.
We've moved to the point in our society where you can say no thank you to champagne on New Year's Eve. You can look someone in the eye and say, I don't drink, and they'll be cool. Almost always. But you can't say no thank you to pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving without getting people really mad. We're in a place where we don't understand what we're doing to ourselves with food, and we don't understand what we're dealing with when we're dealing with food addiction. Okay,
so this is actually really important because you have people fill out the food susceptibility quiz to determine whether or not they have a high predilection towards being a food addict as well. So can you go into a little bit of detail here about how somebody else can figure out whether they also have a high susceptibility to food addiction?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the quiz is like 30 seconds. It's actually not that hard to tell. There's certain signs of it. So first of all, it's largely genetic. If you think you have an addictive personality in any way, shape, or form, you probably do. You've probably sensed it in you already. Human beings are just like rats. We've got a lot of data on this. 1/3 are just not addictable across the board. 1/3 are moderately addictable, and 1/3 are highly addictable. So it's a full 2/3 of the population that have some degree of food addiction in play. A full 2/3 of the population. It's important to note that addictive susceptibility is a baseline constant, but it has to develop in a certain niche. So what I mean by that is, like, I've never developed a shopping addiction, and I haven't really developed a gambling addiction. I've gone a little further down the path with gambling addiction, but mostly I can take it or leave it. Shopping addiction, something about the fluorescent lights in malls has just turned me off, and I've never gotten past square one with it. Because I'm an addictable person, I could eventually develop shopping addiction, but I'd have to have enough experiences where I'm in pain, or I want to numb out, or I'm overly excited, or I've got some kind of heightened state of arousal or need, and I do some shopping, and it like gives me a hit. It like delivers it. And my brain goes, oh, that set of cues leads to that reward. You got to do that over and over again. So what I mean by this is someone who's an alcoholic might have almost no addictive susceptibility to food because they just haven't developed it yet. They still have an underlying susceptibility ultimately, but they haven't developed it with food yet. And they might die and never have developed it. Okay. So I developed a food susceptibility quiz to let you know, not only are you susceptible at all, but have you gone down the path of developing it with food? So the markers are cravings, not feeling satisfied when you eat a normal amount of food. Like, a lot of people are like, I just don't feel full. Like, I'll eat a whole dinner, and then I'll sit on the couch and eat a bag of chips. And then when the chips are gone, I'm looking in the freezer for ice cream. Like, I know I'm not hungry in any kind of physiological sense, but my mouth and my brain are not done eating. Like, they're not done. So another cue is like having too much chatter in your brain about what you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on your plan or off your plan, how many miles, how many calories, how many pounds, what program you're starting, what program you wish you'd started, blah, 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 what you're eating next, what you're going to order in that restaurant, what you're going to prepare for the dinner party, etc. So food obsession. I used to teach a college course on the psychology of eating. And I used to draw a big circle on the chalkboard for my students. And I would say, okay, this circle represents your entire life's focus. Everything you think about, care about, pay attention to, want, remember, dream about, do, right? what percentage of that is taken up by your food and your weight and your exercise, or all that stuff that I just said, what you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on your, and I used to have skinny little girls, normal sized body, beautiful, who would start to cry at that question. And they would whisper 95%, you know? So it's not just a weight issue. It's a food obsession issue. That's why the tagline, happy, thin, and free, is the tagline. It's not just about getting thin. It's not even just about getting healthy. In my view, I know for you guys, health is the point. You're about diabetes. Awesome. In my view, my focus isn't health. It's freedom. It's like, it's getting people out of that mental rigmarole of like being dominated by food. Right. So, and then there's other people to help, and I do help people get healthy too. But to me, it's like, that's the side benefit, right? I'm focused on helping people get happy, thin, and free. So, cravings, obsession, not feeling satisfied, binges, not everybody experiences them, but if you do, that certainly puts you way higher on the susceptibility scale. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So my quiz is 5 questions. You can take it in 30 seconds and it'll give you a score from 1 to 10. 10 is me. I'm probably a 30, but anyway, the quiz only goes up to 10. And 1 is on the low end, and there's people who just have complete neutrality around food always. It's just not really on their radar screen. They have to remind themselves to eat, you know.
Okay, so you mentioned about bright lines. So you have bright lines, number 1 being sugar, 2 flour, 3 meals, and 4 quantities. What exactly is a bright line and why are they important?
Yeah, so I mentioned them earlier around drugs and alcohol, that I set up that bright line and my life got a lot better. I'm telling you, when I set up the bright line for crack cocaine, that was a winning bright line. It means a no exceptions policy. You know, it's a term actually that comes from the law. If you Wikipedia a bright line rule, it's a legal term that means just a clear standard that gets applied always to produce consistent and reliable results. And in psychology, we've co-opted that. I was a tenured psychology professor for many, many years. I handed back tenure, which was scary. Nobody does that, but I handed back tenure like a couple of years ago to just focus on this bright line eating thing full time. But in my career as a psychology professor, I noticed this term bright lines like creeping into the literature here and there, not often, but a little bit. And what we would mean by it is it's like a willpower booster, supporter, bolsterer, like it's a dam that you build that saves you from having to like deal with the water flow all the time. You know what I mean? So one of the clearest examples of this is if you're going to be the designated driver some night, right? You're going to do much better at that job if you just throw up a bright line for alcohol for the night. You just say, I'm not going to have any drinks tonight. Then if you say, I'm going to be sure to drink moderately tonight, right? Because I'm going to be sure to drink moderately tonight is a fuzzy line and you never know exactly when you've crossed it. So it's easy to dupe yourself about where you're at with respect to that kind of rule. A bright line rule, there's no ambiguity. You've either had a drink or you haven't. So the key with bright line eating is people think that you can't have bright lines for food because you have to eat to live. But I'm like, you don't have to eat donuts to live. You really don't. Right. So the bright lines are exactly and precisely the rules that are necessary to take a persistent, horrible, persnickety weight issue and make it go away. No sugar, no flour, meals, so no snacking, no grazing. And this means clear, like no popping a baby carrot into your mouth while you're making your salad. You make your salad first. You sit at the table and you eat your meal. You only eat meals. Every other bite of food all day long is a no thank you, other than your meals. Sugar, flour, meals, and quantities. The quantities line, we use a digital food scale in bright line eating, and people misunderstand the use of that all the time, think it's extreme or until they try it and then they fall in love with their digital food scale. Like literally, I have people writing me emails saying, Susan, if my house were burning down, I would take my cat and my digital food scale and run out the door. Like I never wanted to weigh my food, but until I started because the reason for it is not to make sure actually that you eat the right amount of food. It's to make sure that your brain stays free so that your saboteur can't tell you, oh, you didn't eat enough, go eat a little bit more. Oh, maybe that wasn't it's to have all that chatter go away. And you're like, you ate enough food. Our quantities are enormous. They're ample. We get more people complaining that it's not enough food So it's mostly to quiet the brain chatter, and then also to make sure people eat enough vegetables, which they won't do unless they weigh it. They just won't eat enough vegetables. So, and there's a little bit in there about making sure they don't eat too much of the other stuff, but it's mostly for that. So sugar, flour, meals, and quantities, and yeah, bright lines for food are brilliant. And they turn an intractable weight problem, like a lifetime of suffering with food and weight, into like a easily solvable problem. They're like miracles.
This is amazing. So do you have people who adopt the bright lines, get a lot of success with it, and then when the 8-week program is up, they basically kind of retreat back to their own, their previous habits, and then no longer apply the bright line methodology anymore? How often does that roll around?
Happens all the time. We've got a lot of people like that. Sure, of course we do. Yeah. And we've got a program at the end of the boot camp. The Bright Line Eating Boot Camp is the 8-week program. We've got a program at the end of it called Bright Lifers, which are people. See, here's the thing. People who come into Bright Line Eating, a lot of them have been really burned by their own past efforts. Like they had, in their perception of their life, they've tried everything and nothing has worked. And a lot of them come to us like really fed up with that. And so what we find at the end of the boot camp is a lot of people sign up for Bright Lifers because they're like thinking to themselves, look, I know this feels really easy to me now, but I do not want to backslide like I always have. Like I've done this before. I've felt successful before. And I want this to stick around this time. So I'm going to do what Susan Peirce Thompson says. I'm going to sign up for Bright Lifers and we're going to make this real. And then other people say, I've got this. And maybe they do, but it tends to be a very tiny percentage of them that actually are able to sort of stay with it and re-up the identity of Bright Line Eating day in and day out on their own without being a part of the community long term. It's a small percentage of them. And so a lot of people then veer off. But in general, we have a success rate that's like, it's orders of magnitude higher than anything else out there, because people fall in love with the community and they want to stick around.
Yeah. So this is actually, I've heard you say this before, where you say that you have the most successful weight loss program ever, arguably more successful than Weight Watchers, more successful than MetaFast, more successful than the Atkins diet. So can you explain, what exactly does that mean? And most importantly, why is your approach, what is it about those approaches that's not successful in the long term?
Yeah, totally. So we were just crunching some data. We have a research program on the back end of not only our boot camp, but our follow-up program that just goes on indefinitely, where people get a monthly survey forever and ever. And we've got several thousand people in that program now. And we've had, at least 10,000 people take our boot camp surveys and so forth. So we have a lot of data now. And so we just, I was wondering, like, if I had to distill it down to one statistic, what statistic nails it? Like, what is the statistic? And so here's where we have good worldwide data. We have good worldwide data on the odds that someone who is obese will get to a normal BMI in a year. We know what that number is. It's less than 1%, and it hovers, depending on age or gender, around 0.5%, 1/3%, something like that. And I could send you that paper. I could give you those numbers. There's a couple papers that have been published on that. If you do Bright Line Eating during that year, as opposed to every other thing that you could do to fill up that year, if you start off the year obese and you do Bright Line Eating, you're 55 times more likely to be in a right-sized body at the end of that year. 5,500% more likely.
Wow.
Yeah. And that doesn't include the lift that we're going to see. Now, Bright Line Eating is only 3 years old. So we're going to see an additional lift once we have like 5-year data, 10-year data. We're going to see an additional lift of the odds of sustaining that right-sized body, say 5 years out, is going to be several fold more. So what I'm estimating right now from what I'm seeing, because, when we calculated the numbers for my book, at that point, 87% of the people who'd reached a right-sized body were still there. 87%. No one else is keeping, hardly anybody in a right size, so nobody's getting anybody to a right-sized body, let alone keeping them there for any length of time. So for me, that's the metric. When someone starts a diet, they want to get into a normal sized body. That's like the goal, right? Is like, can I please not be fat anymore? I remember being obese, That's the goal. Can I please not be fat anymore? I want to be in a right-sized body. And we deliver that like nobody's business.
So talk to us about your clients with type 2 diabetes. What type of results do they see coming into the Bright Line Eating program?
They see pretty quick turnaround. So I just pulled the numbers for you because I knew you were going to ask this question. And for type 2 diabetes, in just the 8 weeks of the boot camp, so not even like after that, but in just the 8 weeks of the boot camp, 72% of them experience being able to reduce or eliminate their diabetes medicines from doing Bright Line Eating. We have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people in our Bright Lifers community who are off all medication. And, you know, they say things like, I know I'll always technically have diabetes, but I don't experience any symptoms of it. I'm completely medication free. My blood sugar is steady as a rock, day in and day out. It's like 80 all day long. Yeah. And but 72% of people are solidly on that path. They've either eliminated their medications or they've reduced them and they're on their way just at the end of the 8 weeks. For people with type 1 diabetes, 80% of them have gotten to reduce their medications just through doing the boot camp. So 8 weeks later, 80% of them. Or eliminate some of their medications. They might be actually off some of their medications. I know we talked about this before the interview started, that I'm not sending the message to type 1 diabetics that they can get off all insulin. Not safe. But 80% of them are getting off some of their meds and or reducing some of their meds. Yeah.
Those are powerful statistics. And, you know, it's important to understand that, like, you know, lifestyle change, there's many ways that you can change your lifestyle. And, you know, the Bright Line Eating program has like a very stable track record of success, you know, both in the short term and in the long term. And it's also very similar to what we see in our coaching program when people start to adopt a very, you know, not to say regimented, but just a very clear plan for exactly what to do. And once they do it, they start to see tremendous results. Now, we come at it from the perspective of being plant-based educators. And we teach people, as you know, about how to adopt a 100% plant-based diet for optimal diabetes health. Now, your program is not 100% plant-based, and that's totally fine. So we've had a lot of our members come and join your Bright Line Eating program, and they get tremendous results as well. And they learn about, you know, their addictive nature to food, and they start to really work on that and get away from their addictive behavior. But sometimes people tell us, they say, hey, you know what, I'm a little bit confused about what to do, because on one hand, you guys are the plant-based guys, and you're telling me that to do that for diabetes, but then I go to Bright Line Eating and it's not exactly the same message. So Can you just go into a little bit of detail here about, you know, in your program, if somebody does choose to do a fully plant-based option, is that an option for them? And, you know, do they see any increased benefit as a result of doing that or not?
So it totally is an option for them. And I was resisting interrupting you. I like you too much to interrupt you, but I wanted to say, you said, I think your words were, your program is not 100% plant-based. And I was like, oh, wait, I want to tweak that. Okay. My program is not plant-based for 100% of the people who do it. But it is 100% plant-based for a lot of people who choose to take that route. So to just answer your question, yeah, you could totally do 100% plant-based doing Bright Line Eating. And not only that, I bend over backwards to make that really easy for people. I'm a big believer in plant-based eating. I support it. I was 100% plant-based myself for many, many years. I'm almost entirely plant-based now. I rarely eat carcass, as I sometimes say. So what I do is, you know, Bright Line Eating, you eat categories of food. So I have a protein category, and there is some benefit to, I know that like nutritionally, you could just eat nothing but say brown rice and broccoli and get all the protein you ever need. I get that. But in terms of healing a brain from food addiction, healing a brain that's very damaged from food addiction, there is something very grounding about both fat and protein in terms of grounding out the meal and allowing the nucleus accumbens, leptin sensitivity and stuff to come back on board. So I have categories of food. I limit fat, small servings of fat, and then a serving of protein at each meal. And for that protein, you can choose legumes, you can choose nuts or seeds, you could choose soy products, you could choose, you choose almond milk, if you wanted to just almond milk has almost no protein in it. So I'm like rolling my eyes, it's not really a protein serving, but it's in that category. So if you wanted to eat not much protein, you could game the system and have almond milk for your protein all the time. So anyway, but I've got 2 tables, a plant-based table of protein options and an animal-based table of protein options. And you can pick out of either table or pick freely from both tables or whatever. They all count equally. So, you know, I don't care. You have 4 ounces of chicken or you have 4 ounces of tofu. I don't care. You have 8 ounces of cow's milk. I tell people not super healthy, or you can have 8 ounces of soy milk, almond milk, hemp milk, flax milk. I don't care. They're all on the table.
Okay. So you have worked with thousands of people and seen them go through your program. What do you see as the number one challenge to lifestyle change, and how do you help people overcome that challenge?
Oh, that's a doozy of a question. Yeah, I've worked with now hundreds of thousands of people.
It's a tough one.
You know, I just want to say willingness and surrender. Like, you know, when someone comes to me willing and surrendered, there's nothing that stops them. They just want this. They're doing it. You know, they're in that state of like, you know, open palm, clean slate, like just show me what to do. Like my program just takes that person and just walks them through the steps. You know what I mean? Like, oh, here you go. Here you go. You've got this, baby. Boom. You know, when someone comes in and they're like, but this and that, and, you know, like at the end of the day, I know what the deal is. They want to eat their pizza. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you want to eat your pizza, go eat your, like, I got nothing for you. You know what I mean? If at the end of the day, that's what you want to do, you know, you can couch it and in all kinds of pretty bubble wrap, you know, and pack it in the box. But at the end of the day, if you haven't really, you know, surrendered that this benefit of living happy, thin, and free, and you know, really healthy with your diabetes and all that is like more important to you than, you know, numbing out with those foods, you know what I mean? Then there's nothing I got for you.
I love that answer so much. I feel the same way. If people come into our programs and say, are you willing? You ready to do this? Then, you know, we can help. So that's great.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
It's all about having an open mind.
If you're a single mom and, you know, on a very limited budget and you have 4 kids and you work 2 jobs, I won't lie. That makes it harder. But I'll take the single mom with 4 kids working 2 jobs, and who's willing and surrendered over the rich person with time on their hands, you know, and who's not really willing and not really surrendered all day, every day. Like willingness and surrender are the trump cards. Yeah.
Susan, thank you so much for being here with us today. I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge. I mean, what we've covered today basically only scratches the surface. I mean, I could sit here and ask you questions for hours and really like learn a lot about, you know, a little more information about neuroscience and how that actually governs our, you know, food behavior. But I do hope that, you know, our listeners with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes have gotten a lot out about what you have to say. And I know that the work that you've done over time has really benefited, like you're saying, hundreds of thousands of people. It's really quite impressive. And if I haven't told you already, I really admire you for your dedication and for the, you know, for being able to teach large numbers of people how to actually gain control over their food environment once and for all. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So sweet being with you.